Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am sharing some spring inspired DIYs. For this first project, I found this cute little birdie at my local thrift store a while back, and I decided it was time to make him over. Now, I mixed up some of my metallic copper paint with a little bit of an apple barrel color that's called nutmeg, and I'm just gonna dab this all over this bird, just doing one coat. Since this little birdie had so much detail on him, I thought that this would be the perfect little ceramic piece to do a chippy look on him. Underneath, I wanted him to look bronze or kind of aged in copper, and this is how he looked when he was dry. But then for a top coat over this to give it the chippy look, I'm gonna take some Dollar Tree spackling and I'm gonna rub it all over this bird, making sure that I am pushing it down into all those little grooves. Then I'm just going to let the spackling completely dry for a few hours. Once he was dry and the spackling had set, I'm going back in with some fine grit sandpaper and I'm going to sand over this entire thing. Anywhere that there were clumps of the spackling, I am just sanding that out. Then I'm just going to take a moist paper towel and I'm going to go over some spots on this bird to rub back the spackling so that some of that copper color can show through. And to finish him off, I gave him 2 coats of Aleene's acrylic sealer. Keeping with the bird theme here, I picked up this cute little birdhouse from my thrift store. Again, I picked this up a while back and I'm just trying to get through some of the things that I have collected, and these pieces are going to be perfect for spring. Now, I actually thought this birdhouse was really cute just the way it was, but it was a little worn and the paint was chipping in places. So I gave this a light sanding and then I did about 3 or 4 coats of my white chalk paint. Now, I obviously wanted to dress this birdhouse up a bit, and I'm gonna use one of my molds that I got from Amazon. I always get my molds off of Amazon. They are a great price and work just as well as any expensive molds. So I have these all linked below for you if you are interested. But all I did was press some of my air dry clay into the little bird molds because I wanted to add 2 little birds to the front of this. And since I didn't want to put the flowers on here, I'm just using a little box cutter to cut around the birds. Then I wanted to add a little bit of detail around the edges of the front of the birdhouse. So I'm using another one of my Amazon molds and some air dry clay. And I'm going to use this thinner molding so that I can frame out the front of the birdhouse. Now you'll notice that these don't quite reach the peak of the birdhouse, but that's okay. I will fix that in just a little bit. But first I'm going to go ahead and use some Gorilla Glue gel super glue to attach these pieces of clay while they're still wet. Now to hide that little gap, these molds on the right hand side with the little button shapes also came with my longer molds. So I'm just going to make a little flower button and put that in the center to close up the gap. And again, I'm just using some gel super glue to attach that. And then I attached my little birds that I had made right where those little holes are. Now, since this is a spring decoration piece, I obviously wanted to add just a little pop of color into this. So I'm using some of my vintage scrapbook paper that you guys have seen me use multiple times that I got from Amazon. And I'm just gonna cut this down and then use some Mod Podge to lay this on each side of my birdhouse. And finally, for this project, just to bring out some of the details on the birdhouse and on all of the moldings that I made, I'm using some of my antiquing wax and I'm just very lightly going over this. Now, this next little project is more of a hack than a DIY, I think, but I love to get art prints off of the New York Public Library, or you can also download free prints of art from the Met in New York. But whenever I do this, I usually print it on glossy paper and I want to make it look like a painting. So all I do is take some matte Mod Podge, put it all over the front of my pictures, and then I will take a sponge brush or either a round flat brush and dab this all over where I put the Mod Podge. And once it dries, it turns into a really beautiful piece. I like to leave the glass off of my frames so that you can see the detail once you do this. It looks like a painting. Now, if you really want to give it extra texture, once the first coat dries, you can do a second coat and the texture will just pop off of these pictures and make it look like you have actual paintings. Now for this next project, I had this idea to get a lampshade and make a plant stand out of it. And I thought this would be really cute for spring again. So I grabbed this lampshade from my thrift store for about $1 and I'm just tearing off all of the fabric. Once I had all the fabric off of it, I took it outside and gave it one coat of my matte Rust-Oleum white paint just so that I would have a nice base because I didn't have any black spray paint and I wanted to paint this black for the undercoating. And since this was metal, the spray paint gave a nice coating so that my black chalk paint would have something to adhere to. As I'm going over this with my black chalk paint, I'm not super concerned about the coverage because I don't mind if some of the white shows through. And then over top of this black paint, I'm also going to add in some of my European Rub and Buff. The easiest way I found to apply the Rub and Buff to this is just using a piece of cloth, and then I was able to just get all the little pieces and crevices of the lampshade really quickly. And for any little spots that I couldn't get, like the center of this lampshade, I just went back in with a small little paintbrush and used the Rub and Buff there. Now for the top of this plant stand, I had some of these little birchwood pieces left over from Christmas when I made the table chargers for my dining room. So I wanted to use these up and I thought this would be perfect to go on top of here for the plant stand. But you could use really anything to put on top of here, any scrap pieces of wood you may have or any other wood rounds that you might have already. And to attach it, I just used some Gorilla Glue. For this final project, I really wanted to make a book clock, and it just so happened that I had this book cover left over from a project I did at Christmas time. So this was a perfect opportunity to use something else out of my stash of stuff. Now, obviously, the first thing I needed to do was paint this book cover. So I think I ended up doing 3 coats of my white chalk paint over this entire thing. Then, as you could see, the inside was a little bit damaged from when I tore the books out of it. So I'm using some of this self-adhesive. It's like felt or velvet liner. I got this off of Amazon for just a few bucks for a large pack of it, and I'm gonna cover the entire inside. And since I tore out the book from this book cover, I needed to make a box, so I picked up these paint stir sticks from Walmart. They are like $1.20 for 3 of them, and that's what I'm gonna use to make the box inside the book. But like I said, before I make my box, I am going to go ahead and use that liner to cover the inside of this book. So I just cut down the pieces and then attached them on the inside. And as you can see, it wasn't perfect, but that didn't matter because the box is actually going to cover up anywhere that I didn't put the liner. I did measure exactly what I needed for the box and then just used my miter box saw to cut the pieces down. Now for the first piece of my box, which is going to go right at the spine of this book cover, I did use some gel super glue to attach that, and then I used my Dollar Tree clamps to hold that down and let it dry because I did want this piece to be really secure. And once that piece was dry, I was able to finish my box, and for the other piece, I ended up just using my Gorilla Glue hot glue so that I could get this together easily. And as you can see, I'm only gluing these pieces to the back side of the book because I want this to still be able to open so that I can make it into a clock. Now for the actual clock movement kit, I picked this up at Walmart. I think it was around $5. And this is what I'm going to be using to turn this book into a clock. But before I do that, I obviously want to decorate my book. This is a Tim Holtz stencil that I got from Amazon. I think it is so pretty, and these stencils are actually really perfect to do the spackle technique on them, and I definitely wanted to do that on this book to give it a little bit of a raised detail. So as always, I'm using some Dollar Tree spackling, and I just use painter's tape to tape this down, and then I'm using that little Dollar Tree Cricut spatula to rub the spackling all over my stencil. Now on the outside of the spine of this book, there was still the indentation of the title and the author, so I kind of wanted to cover that up, and I happen to have these great little molds from Amazon again that were like little labels to put on the outside of books or on different decor. So I used some of my air dry clay to make one of those, and then I used gel super glue to attach it to the spine of the book. But as you can see, it didn't totally cover up what I was trying to hide. So I just took a little bit more of that Dollar Tree spackling and just kind of brushed it onto the spine with my finger to cover that up and also give it some more texture. And once everything had a chance to dry, I went back in with some of that European Gold Rub and Buff and just kind of etched out the details with a small paintbrush, making it look a little rustic and vintage. And finally, it was time to turn this book into a really pretty clock. So I marked out where the center was, and then to put the hole in here, I just used my screwdriver, then popped the back of the clock movement kit in, and as you can see, there's a little bolt that I had to tighten on the front that's going to keep this from moving around. Then I was able to just place the hands on there, and I decided not to use the numbers, but you could of course do that as well. And that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed these projects. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.